Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Unveil the Future podcast. This is where we explore the latest advancements and innovation, as well as ideas shaping tomorrow's world. I'm your host for this series, Tao Chen, and it is a pleasure to bring you another episode with a very special guest. This man is a visionary leader in the fields of global business strategy. He's the co-founder and founder, respectively, of two major global indices, the Network Readiness Index and the Global Innovation Index. He's also a member of the VinFuture Prize Council. And without further ado, I am beyond honored to introduce to you for today's episode, Professor Soumitra Dutta, member of the VinFuture Prize Council, the Peter Morris Dean of the SAD Business School at the University of Oxford. Well, Professor Soumitra Dutta, it is an honor to be speaking with you for this installment of the Unveil the Future podcast. Now, let's start with your career. I am very curious to know what exactly motivated you to initiate the projects of starting the Global Innovation Index and also the Network Readiness Index, because you have played such a significant role in shaping the global technology and innovation landscape. I'm just wondering what exactly motivated you and inspired you to initiate these projects?
Well, thank you very much for including me in this podcast series. I'm honored. So both of the research projects you mentioned, the Network Readiness Index and the Global Innovation Index, were all inspired by some basic fundamental questions that we were facing. So in the case of the Network Readiness Index, which was done in the early 2000s, almost 2001, 2002 time period, the key question was, how does technology help societies to develop themselves? How does technology help governments to provide better governance? And how does technology help countries to become more competitive? Today, it might seem all very obvious, but those answers were not really evident at that time. So we created a model that really tried to study it in some more depth. And I must say that some of the choices we made then have proven to be so correct in the following 2 decades. For example, back in 2001, 2002, we argued that the regulatory environment of a country, the kind of societal condition in a country, are very important enablers of how a society can use technology. In those days, people actually thought those are not really critical elements, and it's just a question of putting in technology in schools and giving people PCs and higher bandwidth, and technical attributes were seen as more important, not societal or social attributes. But today we know it's societal and other non-technical attributes are so important for using technology effectively. The same sort of logic applies to the Global Innovation Index, which was driven by the question that how do we capture the innovation happening in many emerging markets, which happens often without any formal patenting, without any formal publications or other kinds of similar sort of traditional artifacts of innovation as it was measured initially. So the whole idea was, how do you capture the innovation being done by farmers without a formal education, without a formal, let's say, patenting process that they follow? How do you capture the innovation that is very much bottom-up driven in such society, while of course recognizing the innovation that is happening in the more formal traditional channels? So the Global Innovation Index was really done to try to build up that kind of a holistic view of innovation. And I must say that both of them have succeeded tremendously. They've helped policymakers around the world in thinking about key topics around technology innovation strategically. Today, for example, the Global Innovation Index is used by governments in more than 100 countries around the world. And it's very important because it has actually shaped the way people think about innovation in a policy perspective. Traditionally, innovation was seen very much as only a science and technology perspective. But today, people realize that innovation requires multiple parts of the government to come together. It requires education, requires infrastructure, requires the business regulatory aspect, requires so many parts of the government, not just only science and technology, and all have to come together to work together. So that really is what I think, the reason these two research reports were inspired by, and also the impact that they've had in shaping government policy at different levels. In fact, even the UN has adopted the Global Innovation Index and its statements and its various sort of proceedings at the highest levels.
Well, so Professor Dutta, you have come from founding startups to advising multinational companies. And so I'm just wondering what exactly drives your passion for entrepreneurship, and how do you exactly balance the two aspects of risk and rewards that are so inherent in startup ventures?
I must say that for me personally, it's always been driven by curiosity. So I'm a curious person by nature, and I like doing things. I like getting my hands dirty. So I was never content with just doing academic research, publishing a paper, which is certainly very important. At the same time, I was also curious about what does it actually mean to start implementing change in organization society. I guess my background as an engineer. So even though I'm in a business school, I have a PhD in computer science, undergraduate engineering. So my engineering side of my background really pushes me in the direction of trying to build things, trying to sort of test out things. And that's really been the reason why I have got into various entrepreneurial ventures. Sometimes done them myself. Sometimes I have been advisor to my students and other small startups that I've worked with. But I enjoy it tremendously. I think there's a risk and reward to it, of course. But I must say that I've been fortunate in the sense that my risk factor has been lower because I've always had a more steady academic role. So it's not that I've had to give up my job or sell my house, remortgage my house, and then basically start a company. So that is high risk. So at one level, I never really did take the high risk. I had a very low level of risk, and I had a steady job. At the same time, I could dabble with time and new interesting projects. So I was lucky in that sense. And I clearly think that it has added to my overall, let's say, experiences, the startup experience. I also am on the board of large major global companies that are publicly listed. So even seeing how large global companies deal with technology issues, and of course, combining that with my consulting and with my research has given me a broad spectrum. So I think that is something I enjoy, to be able to have a broad spectrum of interest across multiple activities.
Well, professors, your career has taken you across many continents, working with diverse cultures, as well as being exposed to diverse perspectives. And so can you share with us any memorable experiences or lessons that you have learned or garnered from these sort of interactions with the global industry? And how has this sort of experience shaped your approach to leadership and innovation?
So, one of the best parts of my job, being a professor in a top school, is the interactions you have with so many bright people around the world. So I've had the good fortune of, being a student, being a professor in America, being a professor in Europe, and also having a lot of experience in emerging markets in Asia. So that has actually helped me tremendously. And I think for me, the fact that I've interacted with people from different cultures has given me much more, I think, perspective on how we share many things, yet there are some subtle differences. So I would say, people and young people, especially across the world, they share so many common features. They all want to have a positive impact on the world. They all want to, find avenues for expressing the potential, and they all, really want to do good for the world in multiple ways. Now, yet at the same time, there are also some differences, and I have seen the differences, emerge across cultures. If I look at, for example, America and to some degree Asia, which is very true also, there's a greater urge amongst the young people in America and Asia to, in fact, create wealth, to actually succeed with new ventures and new companies and new technologies and create wealth. I would say in Europe, of course, people want to do well and create wealth, but there's a greater emphasis on living well. There's a greater emphasis on balancing work life and personal life. There's a greater emphasis on maybe doing good for the society and for environment. So there's some subtle differences across culture that I'm more sensitive to. Yet at the same time, I would say there are more similarities than differences across all the bright people in the world that I've interacted with across cultures.
And Professor, speaking of diverse experience in diverse backgrounds, could you shed any lights on the challenges and the obstacles that startups may encounter when they try or attempt to implement new technologies or innovation? And are there any sort of discernible differences between the setting of a developing country?
So, startups are very, very interesting because, of course, as the founder of a startup, you need to have the passion and the drive. If you don't have the passion and drive, you cannot do a startup. Not a startup is not for everyone because it's a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of stress. Because startups, as we all know, never have a linear path to success. It's always very complicated, ups and downs, and so on. So if I look at startup and startup founders, what I found very common is that startup founders have this resilience. At least successful ones have the resilience. The resilience to keep going on despite pushbacks, despite some failures, despite some setbacks. And that courage to go on, the resilience to fight against adversity is remarkable because, as I said earlier, startups never follow a simple linear path to a success. The successful startups always have ups and downs. And it's how you negotiate, how you react to the downs. It's very easy in the up period. But when you have a down period, how do you react to it? How do you pull yourself up and then restart and re-energize yourself in the business becomes very critical. So what I've seen is that this is something which is very important. And this, of course, depends on the culture of a country. So if you take cultures where failures are more accepted, let's say typically more in America, it's okay to fail. It's fine. In fact, many venture capitalists will not give you money if you have not failed in some enterprise because you actually haven't gone through the process of trying out a new business and going through the whole process of testing ideas in the market and then realizing what happens. In some countries, in contrast, actually failures are not accepted that nicely. And that can be very hard because if you try something new, you're taking a risk. If you take a risk, there's always a possibility you will fail. And if that failure sort of sticks with you as a stigma, if banks don't want to give you loans, if your family members don't think you did a good thing, you need family support also in these situations. If your colleagues and friends think that you were not the brightest and not the smartest to do this, then that affects your own psychology about how you see yourself as a startup founder. So I do believe that there are some cultures that are more supportive. Also, the important issue is the issue of funding. All startup, besides the passion of the founder and a good idea, needs money. You need money to scale up. And the reality, once again, is that most countries do not have well-developed VC systems. So in America and a few other countries, you might have well-developed, VC systems, but in most countries, the challenge. So the risk capital is not easily available for most startup founders, and that can affect a lot of the choices that founders make, a lot of the decisions they make about should I stick with the company and scale it up or should I sell? Many times people sell out because they don't have access to scale up capital. The hardest thing is not to find the seed capital. The hardest thing is to find the scale up capital. When you actually about to prove a good idea, but you need to scale it up, that's when you need that 30, 50, $100 million to be able to scale up the idea. And that often is very difficult to find for many people in many countries. So, the combination of culture and the availability of risk capital are important factors that vary across countries.
And moving on, Professor, I would like to touch on your experience as the Peter Morris Dean of the STAD Business School at Oxford University. Could you elaborate on any distinguishing features of the Oxford MBA program compared to many endeavors that you have been involved in the past when it comes to establishing renowned MBA programs worldwide?
So, Oxford is a very, very special university. And I'm not saying it because I'm currently employed at Oxford. I've had 33 years of experience in different business schools around the world. I've been here at Oxford only 2 years. And Oxford is special. Oxford is special not just because it is 1,000 years old, it's got the ancient buildings and beautiful ambience. Oxford is special because it inspires you. I think today what you need are situations or people, or environments that inspire you. And Oxford is a place, when you think of all the great people, the great leaders of the world who pass through the doors of the institution that you're currently working or studying in, it inspires you. It makes you want to do better. It actually makes you reach to a higher level. So Oxford is one of the places that is inspirational. Oxford is also one of the places that allows you to dream. And I say dream in a positive way, because if you want to build new things, you have to be able to imagine it, you have to dream it. And it's one of the few places in the world that gives you the right to dream. Now, it might seem a little bit, you know, ambitious what I'm saying, but it is not really. It is a reality. The only limitations to what we can dream at Oxford is your own physical mental capability. And this is what I tell our students. I tell our students that, look, you are privileged to be at Oxford, and Oxford is one of the unique places that inspires you, that gives you the right to dream. And so if you ask the question, what makes Oxford MBA special, I think it gives you that ability to be inspired, gives you the right to dream. And the MBA as such is very much focused on impact, trying to have a positive impact on the world, on society, on the environment. Of course, impact happens through multiple ways. Some people make an impact by starting an NGO. Some people actually might join Amazon or a traditional company and have an impact through Amazon, because even Amazon is a company that actually has a huge footprint around the world. And these companies have a tremendous, tremendous global power to change. So we need to be able to get people to drive change. And also very important at Oxford is we tell people the importance of driving systematic change, not just change, you individually, but you have to pull together a coalition of partners across the different sectors to be able to make change. For example, if you want to make change in the food system of a country, you don't have to only work with agriculture companies. You have to work with a whole range of companies involved in the distribution, production, storage of food, the processing of food. You have to bring the whole system together to be able to make really reasonable change. So I really believe that the MBA at Oxford gives people that ability to dream, to be inspired, to be much more impact oriented, and also very important to think of change as a systemic issue.
And Professor, as you mentioned the term impact-oriented direction, I'm just wondering, are there any sort of specific areas that an MBA student or an alumni should focus on when it comes to establishing their career?
I think today, if you look at the UN SDG goals, they cover almost everything around us, starting from water and environment and agriculture and industry and education. It covers health, everything. So I don't think there's any shortage of opportunities for MBA students or for young people anywhere in the world to be able to have an impact. I would say begin anywhere. Begin anywhere that's of interest to you. Begin somewhere which you have some experience in or you are close to, you have some resources. It's very hard to begin in completely new domain, completely new location, completely new area. We don't have the resources. So you've got to begin in a place where you have some strengths and you can build on the strength. And I think you can make an impact in almost any domain. So I think there's no shortage of opportunities. The challenge is to be able to convert. I think today the challenge is not having ideas. There are too many ideas. The challenge I always feel is in execution, is who has the ability to execute on ideas. And execution matters, because without execution, idea just remains an idea. It doesn't actually go anywhere. So it's very important to be able to have that kind of a sort of focus on execution, and the execution can be on trying to help achieve some of the UN SDG goal deficits, because all the UN SDG goals, we're running deficits, and we'll not achieve any of them most likely by 2030 if we don't really scale up many of the technologies and solutions. And so I think a lot of the effort really depends upon trying to understand what is the one thing where I'm the strongest in, and then trying to find the solutions out there, trying to find the ecosystem of partners out there, and trying to actually execute and scale up the execution. That's, I think, the challenge.
And Professor, as you mentioned, the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, this leads me to my next question regarding the VinFuture Prize. You are a member of the VinFuture Prize Council, so which means that you are at the forefront of recognizing scientific breakthroughs. And so what exactly excites you the most about joining and being a part of this initiative?
So I think the VinFuture Prize is a great initiative, by the chairman and founder of the Vin Group, Pham Noah Wong. I think he's a visionary. He has created an amazing business enterprise. And I think what is impressive is that he's now trying to inspire the people of Vietnam, inspire the people of other emerging markets about the potential of science and technology. See, the problem that we have in many emerging markets is that there is very low level of investment in scientific R&D. Today, even now, most of the scientific R&D happens in a few countries. And China is an exception. China is one exception of an emerging markets country that has really excelled in R&D. But with that exception, pretty much most of the countries haven't done enough in R&D. But you need to do more in R&D in all these countries. You need to have the bright young people, the scientists inspired. So I really admire what the Chairman Wong is doing in terms of trying to find a way to inspire people, not just in Vietnam, but the region, to invest more in science and technology. This is an inspiration for young people, for scientists, professors, but also an inspiration for companies, because companies are also important sources of investment in R&D. So you need companies also to invest in R&D more. Now, that vision is impressive and certainly was one of the reasons why I joined. But what I think is also attractive for me is that this prize, the Vin Prize, is focusing on large-scale global impact. It's not just on having a scientific discovery. One of the criteria, very important criteria of the prize is, has that scientific discovery impacted the lives of many millions in a positive way? And finding that connection between not just great science, but also science that leads to a positive impact is at the heart of the VinFuture Prize. And I think that's very attractive for me, and that's why I'm very happy to be part of the Vin Prize, VinFuture Prize Council.
Well, Professor, the name Soumitra Dutta is recognized as the architect of many successful startups and also as the key that holds the success to the doors of many startup ventures. However, little is known about your personal motivations that drive you toward the specific path of your career. And so for the next part of our discussion, I would like to shift our attention to your inspirations, to your personal motivations, and maybe a little bit more knowledge regarding the formative year of a young Soumitra Dutta. Well, Professor, you've had a remarkable career spanning from academia, business, to entrepreneurship. Can you share with us any sort of personal anecdotes or any motivations or inspirations that took place in your younger years that led you to this specific path?
Everyone has their own unique life journeys, and I'm reminded of something I read in Jack Welch's memoir. He said that if you look back at your career and you try to think what were the pivotal moments that made a difference for you in your life, professionally. Personally, of course, it also has a number of important implications. He says that 80% of the moments were unplanned. Maybe you planned 20% of the pivotal moments, but 80% unplanned. Basically, what he wanted to say is that a lot of what happens in life happens because of serendipity, happens because of circumstances, happens because you're in a certain situation. And then you have to react to it. You got to react to it. How you react to it affects a lot of things that happen in your life. And I can, like, I can find also several moments in my life that happen in that manner. But let me take one example, which probably was very instrumental for me at the very start of my career, and I never thought it would be that way. I was doing my PhD in computer science at Berkeley, in California. I had every intention to stay on at Berkeley, stay on in the Bay Area. The Bay Area is the hotbed for computer science, and I was very much keen to stay back there. And then, of course, I met my wife while I was studying at Berkeley, and she was on a Fulbright scholarship. And the Fulbright scholarship required her to leave the country for 2 years. And we had a small young baby that time. So I was faced with the very important question of what should I do? Should I continue living in the US and let my wife go back to Europe with the baby? Or should I go with her and be with her for the 2 years that we had to be outside the US? Not an easy decision, believe me. In those days, it was a very difficult decision. And in fact, my parents, my professor, everyone was arguing that I should stay in the US and do what is right for my career at that time. I made the decision to go to Europe, and I made the decision because I didn't apply for too many jobs. The only job I applied for at that time was INSEAD, which was a young business school starting out, good, but not yet as famous in 1990 as it is today. And for me, that was a pivotal moment. I never imagined, because I always thought 2 years I'll be in France and I'll come back to the US. 2 years I'll be maybe outside computer science in a business school, and I'll come back to computer science. But guess what? I never did. I did come back to the US after many years, 20 years, but I never did come back to computer science, pure computer science. Of course, I applied technology in business. And that has been pivotal in my life, because what has happened is, of course, it has defined my professional life completely. And the origin of it is completely by chance, as I explained. But also what is interesting is that back in 1990, I could not have predicted, no one could have predicted the amount of influence technology would have in business. Because in 1990, technology was a back office function, was seen as the back office, not strategic, something that you did as an electricity and water supplier of a company. Today, 30 years later, information technology and computers are critical for the strategy of a company, for the core of a company. And I have been able to experience that. I've been able to be part of the transformation sitting inside a business school. So that kind of a close, let's say, integration with that major change around us probably would not have happened as easily for me if I had stayed back in a computer science department in the US or somewhere. So I think, that was a very pivotal moment, happened by accident, and it went on to define my life in a fundamental manner.
And so, Professor, you said that every moment in life is unplanned. And would you consider this to be some sort of value that has guided you throughout your not just your life, but also your career?
I would say yes, to some degree. Of course, I cannot deny that, like any motivated young person, I also made plans. I also tried to, do specific projects and get specific, recognition in different ways. But with some benefit of experience and age, I think there is the wisdom that someone once told me that I believe is particularly relevant. This person was a friend, senior, much more older friend. He once told me, let life come to you. Yeah, and I thought that is very profound, because if you think of the classical way in which we often, tell people that you have to have goals and objectives and plan for it and fight for it and and work hard for it. Of course, you got to work hard. I'm not saying you don't work hard, but with the benefit of hindsight, benefit of age, I've come to believe a little bit more in this let life come to you philosophy, by which I mean that don't get stressed too much by specific objectives that you may meet or may not meet. Uh, Life will happen. And the challenge for us is to accept life, to embrace life, and to be able to adapt and, in a positive way, do the right things. The challenge, of course, is to decide what is the right thing. It's like I go back to my own decision back 30 years ago, whether I should go to Europe with my wife and the young child, or whether I should stay back in America. I think I made the right decision in that case. Okay. And in every situation, what is the right decision will vary, for person to person, situation to situation. It's not often easy to decide what is the right decision. But I think the more that you can accept life in a more humble and neutral fashion, the more you can do the right thing as much as possible and as best as you can. And the more that you can, sort of be happy that you are doing your best. And sometimes you succeed and sometimes you don't succeed. That's the reality of life. Not everyone succeeds. Not everyone becomes a Nobel laureate. Not everyone becomes, a great leader. Not everyone, gets the CEO's role. But you have to derive your happiness from making the right decisions, from embracing life, and doing your best in the situation that you are in right now. And I think that's what little bit. So now with the benefit of some experience, this is what I tell young people nowadays. Because often the young people I meet, in a university like Oxford or somewhere else, are very driven. They're in the 20s and they want to conquer the world and they want to, do this great thing and other great things, and which is all very good. I don't want to detract from the inspiration. You need to be inspired, as I said earlier. But at the same time, don't get too upset if you don't meet your goals. I think there are wonderful opportunities in life pretty much in every situation. You just have to have the right attitude, be, as I said earlier, humble and open to different situations. So it's a more, let's say, experienced, more nuanced feedback that I have out here, but that's where my current thinking is more along those lines.
Well, Professor, I'm sure that many of our audience will be able to find a sense of relief and a comfort knowing that a renowned figure like you just said that let life come to you. And as we wrap up today's discussion and conversation, reflecting on your journey so far, what legacy would you hope to leave behind in terms of business innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship? And what sort of advice would you give to our audience?
I think a lot of of course, I feel I have been able to touch the lives of many students. I've been able to touch the progress of many companies through my work. So that's very good and very satisfying. But in terms of a legacy, mainly what I hope I've been able to do is I have brought in a level of conceptual understanding and a framework for measuring two very important phenomena around us today. One is technology, and second is innovation. And these are very broad themes or topic areas, and sometimes a little fuzzy. It's like the elephant, depending on which part of the elephant you touch, a blind person can describe the elephant different ways. So technology is a huge thing, innovation is a huge thing. How do you even start comprehending what and how to look at these areas? And if you're a business leader or if you're a policy leader, how do you actually start implementing policies supporting your technology and innovation goals? And I think my work on the Network Readiness Index, the Global Innovation Index, has given people that tool. It's a practical tool to be able to comprehend the shape of the elephant. What does the elephant look like? And B, how to measure it. how to actually make sure the elephant is moving the right direction, is acting and behaving like in the, the right, like a tiger, agile, flexible, whatever, or is doing the good things with the environment, society. So you need to be able to have those measurement techniques. It's like in what is often in management, if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. And today, I think we're living in a world where it's very important to manage technology, manage innovation, such that it is good for society, good for the environment, good for countries. And I hope that my work has enabled the leaders to take some good steps in those directions.
Well, Professor Soumitra Dutta, thank you very much for joining us for this episode of the Unveil the Future podcast. Your invaluable contribution has made a lasting impact on not just our team, but also our audiences alike. And for that, we are very grateful for your participation. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend a heartfelt appreciation to our audience. Your continued support has been instrumental in the success of our podcast. We hope that today's episode and that your listening continues to propel you towards your future endeavors, and that you'll be able to resonate with a portion, with hopefully not just a portion, but also a lot shared in this episode. And with deep gratitude, thank you very much for listening. And we look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you and goodbye.